My name is Benjamin Brooks. Most often, my name is Ben, and when I was a kid, my name was Benji, which, to be honest, sounded like I was a little dog and not a person. I was born in sunny California, in a city where palm trees and coconut milk smoothies are valued more than common sense. The town was called Santa Clara, and if you Google it now, then yes, this is the same one where there are only its specialists and companies with 3 letters in the name. I was an only child, which pretty much explains why I grew up with high self-esteem and a love of attention. My mother, Mary Brooks, was an English teacher, which explains why I speak quickly and coherently, and my father, Henry Brooks, was an auto mechanic, which explains why I know how to fix an old engine, but have no idea how to use a scanner in a supermarket. My childhood was spent surrounded by the smell of motor oil, pages of classic literature, and constant lectures on how a man should be able to work with his hands. A naive father, he clearly did not know what world his son was growing up in. I grew up as a fairly smart child. I loved books, but not so much that I was considered a bore. School was easy for me, but that doesn't mean I was a good boy. Oh no, I was that guy who always knew how to lighten the situation with a joke, but still managed to avoid getting into serious trouble. In 5th grade, I realized that people love funny people, especially teachers, when these funny guys know how to shut up in time. Appearance? Well, let me tell you, I wasn't the guy that girls were chasing, but if there was a ranking of guys who can pass for cute in the right lighting, I'd be at the top. Dark brown hair, brown eyes, slightly above average height. I wasn't athletic, but I wasn't in the nerdy nerd category either. In general, he looked like a guy you could take to a street football team, but don't expect goals from him. As I grew up, I became interested in everything that somehow made it possible to seem cool. I played the guitar well. As I played, I knew 3 chords, but that was enough to impress people who only knew one. I was interested in cars because otherwise my father simply would not have understood me. And of course, I dreamed of a great life, one where I was successful, independent, and never worked in an office in a gray suit. My youth flew by like a short commercial, and now am already standing on the threshold of adulthood, full of ambitions, hopes, and, well, slight panic, because no one warned that being an adult means not only freedom, but also bills, work, and getting up early. But let's not talk about that for now. This is not a story about how I faced reality, but about who I was before it started hitting me over the head. My first serious adventures began when I turned 16. By this time, I knew very well how to start the old engine, but I had no idea how to cope with real-life challenges. For example, with your first job. Mom decided it was time for me to learn what it meant to make money, and she got me a job at a small diner where I washed dishes and peeled potatoes. This was the first lesson that life is not always about jokes and entertainment. I endured for 3 whole months before I found a way to leave this dull work. It seems to be for a good reason. I had to prepare for admission. Of course, I really prepared, but first of all, I tried to find a more interesting job. So I got a job in my father's friend's garage, where I first learned how to disassemble cars for parts and learned that under the hood there was not only oil, but also a whole heap of dirt that no one had ever cleaned. By the age of 18, I already had a good understanding of cars, knew how to distinguish a gasoline engine from a diesel one. Yes, don't laugh. There are people who are still confused and even drove a little. I also realized that the world is much more complicated than I thought. There was a new life ahead, and I felt that the adventure was just beginning. Besides cars, I was interested in photography. I liked to capture moments, to capture the emotions of people who themselves did not notice how beautiful they were. I even won a local photography competition once, but unfortunately the award was just a certificate for free pizza. However, I didn't complain in those years. Free food was a sacred gift for me. I was also interested in swimming. Water always calmed me down, and if life started to feel too confusing, I would just dive into the pool and stay there until my fingers wrinkled. It was my way of escaping reality and thinking about the future that had yet to be built. Choosing a career is hard, especially when you're 18 and the only thing you really know about is old cars and being smart. I always thought I would work with machines, but it seemed too predictable. My father, of course, saw me as a car mechanic, a continuator of the family business, but I wanted something else, something that would give me freedom. When it came time to apply to college, I was hesitant. There were several options: a technical university, an art college, or something related to business. Photography has always been interesting to me, but making a career out of it, too unreliable, business, boring. What remained was the technical university, which, in general, was logical, given my interest in technology. I chose the engineering program, and, to my parents' surprise, I was accepted. The first few months passed in complete chaos. A new city, new people, lectures that lasted 3 hours. The campus was a huge labyrinth of glass buildings, concrete paths, and endless green lawns where students sat with laptops, staring at the screens with expressions of complete despair or fascination. But what struck me most was how quickly adult life began to creep up on me. Now I had to take care of my own bills, food, and schedule. No one forced me to wake up in the morning, but if I didn't, I would fail. Among my classmates, there were many enthusiastic people who already knew what they wanted. Some dreamed of a career in Silicon Valley, others dreamed of developing new technologies. They sat in the library for hours, understanding formulas and algorithms, and then went to coffee shops to discuss projects and startups. I still felt out of place. Something inside told me that I had not yet found my place. I tried to delve into the programs, study the diagrams, but I wasn't in the mood. I wanted something more creative, lively. One day after classes, I wandered into a photo studio that was located next to the campus. It was one of those places where you go by chance, but end up staying longer than you planned. The owner of the studio, an elderly man with gray hair and a slight smile, noticed my interest and suggested that I try my hand at photography seriously. He showed me how a professional camera works, how to play with light, and how to catch shots correctly. The air smelled of film developing chemicals, and photographs hung on the walls, portraits of people, random street shots, abstract compositions of shadows and light. This place beckoned me. This moment was a turning point for me. I began to spend more and more time in the studio, combining my studies with a new hobby. Soon my photographs began to attract attention, and I was even offered a small part-time job photographing events at the university. This was the first money I earned not from physical labor, but from something that I really liked. I spent hours studying cameras, reading articles about the art of photography, trying to shoot with different optics, experimenting with colors and contrasts. The camera became an extension of my hand, a tool with which I could see the world differently. But choosing a profession remained difficult. My parents expected me to graduate from university and find a stable job in engineering, but every day it became more and more difficult for me to imagine myself behind drawings and in laboratories. I was drawn to creativity, to something more alive and dynamic. But the risk, quit engineering to pursue a dream, it was scary. What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm one of the thousands of photographers struggling to make ends meet? I was torn between logic and passion. Should I follow the traditional engineering path as originally planned, or should I take a risk and pursue something that truly brought me joy? I finally completed my higher education, receiving an engineering degree, and as my parents expected, I got a job in a large company. Fate brought me to one of the leading technology giants, where I was offered a prestigious position with a high salary, numerous bonuses, and career prospects. The work turned out to be dynamic, full of projects, requiring full involvement. Over the course of several years, I rose in rank, proving my competence and earning the respect of my colleagues. My office was located in an ultra-modern skyscraper in the city center, on one of the high floors, which offered a breathtaking view of the panorama of the metropolis. Every morning, approaching my workplace, I felt a slight sense of pride. This spacious office, with luxurious furniture, glass partitions, and high-tech systems, was a part of my life. Huge windows filled the space with natural light, and the bustle of the city seemed distant, as if on the other side of reality. Every morning began with aromatic coffee, which I ordered from the same coffee shop on the way to work, where they already knew me by name. The baristas always greeted me with a small smile and served me a cup of my favorite drink, rich espresso with thick crema. These small rituals gave my everyday life a special rhythm. Life seemed to have worked out perfectly. I lived in a spacious apartment in an elite residential complex with panoramic windows through which the first rays of the sun broke through in the morning. A bathroom with marble trim, a dressing room filled with suits from the best designers, and a huge living room with modern appliances. Everything spoke of prosperity and comfort. Downstairs, there was a fitness center where I sometimes visited after work, and a heated swimming pool where I could relax after a busy day. My car was the latest model, fast, comfortable, with leather interior and the most advanced technology. It adjusted to my preferences, automatically adjusting the seats and climate control system to suit my driving style. In the evenings, I often went to fashionable restaurants, where they already knew me by name and where dishes were prepared to order. Constant business trips, negotiations in the best hotels, meetings with influential people, all this has become an integral part of my life. Money is no longer a problem. I could afford everything I could only dream of before. Travel anywhere in the world, expensive gadgets, exclusive things. However, despite this, there remained a feeling inside that something was missing. Material success provided comfort, but did not bring that deep satisfaction that comes when you do something that is truly meaningful to yourself. Despite all the success, I never forgot about my true passion, photography. In the evenings, after a long day of work, I would return home, take off my business suit, and immerse myself in the world of art. I continued to learn new shooting techniques, took online courses, and experimented with light and shadows. I devoted weekends to my photo walks, capturing moments of metropolis life, random smiles of passers-by, bizarre reflections in glass facades, the play of light on the asphalt after the rain. Over the years, I have made a wide circle of acquaintances in the creative community. My friends became artists, photographers, musicians, people who lived by art. I visited exhibitions, participated in closed creative evenings, and conducted photo sessions for friends. Despite my success in the corporate world, I felt truly free among these people. At the age of 30, through hard work, I achieved a high financial level. My account was impressive because from an early age, I understood how to invest money correctly so that it would work for me without my participation. I carefully studied investment strategies, analyzed financial markets, consulted with experts, and invested in promising companies and real estate. These investments generated stable passive income, which allowed me to live in complete financial independence. Despite the success achieved, I never stopped improving and looking for new opportunities for growth. I studied everything that could help me further strengthen my financial position, from cryptocurrencies to innovative technologies. Over time, my investments began to bring such serious dividends that I could afford to work not for money, but for pleasure. When I had the opportunity to go to the islands with an employee for the wedding of his wife's friend and take a couple of photos, I decided why not. It seemed like an easy adventure, a pleasant break from the usual routine. Islands, warm breeze, azure water, and me with a camera in my hands, ready to capture magical moments. At that moment, I didn't think that this trip would change anything in my life. I just planned to have a good rest and pay some attention to my hobby. The flight to the islands was the beginning of something new. As the plane climbed, I looked out the window, watching the city below us turn into tiny lights. There was a strange feeling of anticipation, as if this trip was about something more than just relaxation and a couple of wedding photos. My friend Alex, he was a financial specialist, a man who could talk on any topic and maintain an easy conversation. He was looking forward to this trip, chatting non-stop about his wife Linda, her friend the one who was getting married, and about the upcoming ceremony. I listened with half an ear, nodding occasionally, more enjoying the anticipation of encountering something new. Landing on the islands, we were greeted by moist, warm air and the smell of salt in the air. The first thing that caught my eye was the brightness of the colors. The ocean shimmered in shades of blue and turquoise, the sand shone with dazzling whiteness, and green palm trees swayed to the rhythm of the light breeze. This place looked like a postcard, but it was real. Our hotel was located near the beach. Spacious rooms with huge balconies, a pool overlooking the ocean, and a bar serving cocktails made it feel like paradise. Alex and his wife immediately went to meet their friends, and I decided not to waste time and went to explore the area. The lens of my camera immediately captured incredible landscapes: boats rocking on the waves, fishermen mending nets right on the shore, bright houses with terraces buried in flowers. There were small cafes along the street, smelling of freshly brewed coffee and spicy dishes. In one of these places, I met a waiter named Diego, a local resident, who with a smile told me about the island, its way of life, and the fact that every day here is a small holiday. In the evening, I met with the company that had come to the wedding. It felt like I was in a movie. Funny conversations, laughter, glasses of champagne, light music sounding from somewhere far away. Everyone was relaxed and enjoying the moment. I met several guys: Mark, a friend of the groom who turned out to be a lawyer, and Kevin, a photographer who came to photograph the ceremony. We quickly found a common language, discussing different shooting techniques and the best moments worth capturing at weddings. Preparations for the wedding were in full swing. The bride, Emily, was glowing with happiness. Her friends were running around the hotel, choosing outfits and discussing the last details. I was asked to take some test shots. I agreed, realizing that this could be a great opportunity to practice and capture something special. The camera seemed to come to life in my hands, capturing every moment: smiles, sincere glances, the wind playing with the girl's hair. The following days were filled with meetings, walks, and new emotions. We went sailing, explored the hidden corners of the island, sampled local delicacies, and simply enjoyed every moment. I became more and more immersed in the atmosphere of the island, enjoying its rhythm, freedom, and the feeling that time moves differently here. One night, sitting on the beach with a camera in my hands, I saw her. She appeared from the darkness, like a vision, slowly walking along the soft sand. Tall, graceful, with long wavy hair that caught the moonlight and shimmered with shades of gold. Her silhouette was mysterious, as if created by nature itself in order to attract glances. She walked barefoot, leaving light footprints on the wet sand, and the translucent dress flowed softly around her figure, emphasizing every curve of her body. The wind played with the fabric, revealing the thin lines of her legs and waist, creating an effect of lightness and ephemerality. She was holding a glass of some dark drink in her hands, and her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but changed her mind. Her eyes, deep and dark as the night sky itself, met mine. At that moment, it seemed to me that time had slowed down, that the whole world around had disappeared, leaving only the two of us. She smiled mysteriously, softly, with a slight play in the corners of her lips, as if she knew something that I had yet to learn about. This moment was as if snatched from a dream, so perfect that it seemed unreal. I instinctively raised the camera, trying to capture this ephemeral moment. She continued to move along the shore, and I managed to take a few photos while the moonlight softly emphasized her silhouette. Suddenly, she stopped, put the glass at her feet, and, without hesitation, threw off her dress. Her naked body, illuminated by the silvery glow of the moon, looked like a living work of art. With a quiet sigh, she took a step forward and entered the water, letting the waves wrap around her waist. I couldn't take my eyes off. The camera continued to capture this mesmerizing moment. She didn't look back. She just enjoyed the feeling of freedom, as if neither me nor this world existed. The water gently accepted her, reflecting the light and creating the illusion of weightlessness. It was a shot that could not be adjusted or repeated, the pure magic of the moment. I didn't want to disturb the intimacy of her solitude. Having taken the last pictures, I quietly lowered the camera, took another look at this mysterious picture, and slowly stood up. Step by step, I left the beach, leaving her in this mysterious dance with the waves. Later, in my room, I lay down on the bed and turned on the camera. The screen lit up, showing the footage it had captured. Her silhouette, naked under the moon, her movement in the water, her lightness and freedom, all this fascinated, attracted, haunted. I looked at the photographs for a long time, tormenting myself with painful thoughts. Why didn't I dare to come up and meet you? Will I be able to meet her again? If fate gives me this chance, I won't let it slip away. The morning of the wedding turned out to be truly magical, as if nature itself had decided to bless this day with its impeccable harmony. The first rays of the sun, timidly peeking over the horizon, softly spread across the sky, coloring it in delicate shades of pink, peach, and gold. This smooth transition of colors created the impression that the sky was woven from silk, along which tiny pearls of morning dew were scattered. The ocean stretched to the horizon, serene and majestic, like a giant mirror reflecting the shimmer of the rising sun. Its smooth surface was only slightly disturbed by lazy waves that gently rolled onto the shore, leaving behind patterns of fluffy foam. A light breeze, carrying the freshness of the early morning, gently moved the coastal palm trees, making their leaves rustle, as if they were talking to each other in an unfamiliar language of nature. Aromas filled the air, creating a unique morning bouquet. Here, the tart smell of freshly brewed coffee, wafting from the hotel's open terraces, mixed with the delicate fragrance of exotic flowers blooming in the pre-dawn cool. Light notes of jasmine and gardenia intertwined with the smell of sea salt, creating a special, unique aroma that could be called the breath of the island. The morning bustle had already begun on the terraces. Hotel employees in immaculately pressed uniforms carefully set the breakfast tables, placing crisp croissants in wicker baskets and arranging porcelain cups. In the distance, one could hear the muffled laughter of guests who had already come out to enjoy the freshness of the morning and the occasional strumming of a guitar coming from somewhere in the depths of the garden. Everything around was permeated with anticipation of the upcoming celebration, a day that promised to be the happiest in the lives of two loving hearts. I woke up early, succumbing to inner excitement, which only grew with every minute. The room was filled with the muted light of dawn, the soft rays of the sun breaking through the light curtains, casting golden patterns on the snow-white sheets. There was a faint scent of salt and flowers in the air, coming from the open balcony. Somewhere in the distance, the ocean roared rhythmically, its lazy rhythm reminiscent of the breathing of a sleeping giant. Even though weddings are definitely not my thing, this day promised to be special. I couldn't help but think about that mysterious stranger I met on the beach last night. Who is she? Will I be able to see her again? I reached for the camera on the nightstand and flipped through the pictures again. In one of them, her silhouette, graceful and mysterious, stood out against the backdrop of the night ocean. The wind played with her long hair, the moon illuminated the sand under her feet, creating the illusion that she was floating above the shore. This shot seemed to tease me, making me wonder if this meeting was just an accident or something more. I sighed, put the camera away, and headed downstairs. Guests had already gathered by the pool. They were talking animatedly, enjoying the morning coolness and fresh drinks. I noticed Alex, who was lounging on a lounge chair, relaxingly sipping juice from a tall glass. His snow-white linen shirt was casually unbuttoned at the top buttons, and he had a contented smile on his face. Linda, his wife, sat nearby, beaming and full of energy. She was animatedly discussing the latest preparations with her friends, her eyes shining with joy. Alex noticed me first and immediately waved his hand, beckoning me to the table. "Well, are you ready for this big day?" he asked with the usual mockery, winking. I chuckled as I took the cup of coffee from the table and took my first sip. The aroma was rich, enveloping, like the first morning energy penetrating the blood. "Am ready to watch others lose their freedom," I drawled, enjoying the bitter taste of the drink. Linda laughed cheerfully, shaking her head. "Not all men are so pessimistic about marriage, Ben," she said, narrowing her eyes slyly. "Sometimes it's the best thing that can happen." "Tell that to those who divide property in court," I retorted, but there was no anger in my voice, only a slight shade of playful cynicism. Alex snorted, pretending to be deep in thought. "Perhaps, but at least the wedding parties are pretty good." He grinned and raised his glass. "So I suggest you take a moment and just enjoy the day." I smiled. Perhaps he was right. After all, this day may have turned out to be much more interesting than I expected. The conversation smoothly turned into a discussion of the wedding. Topics replaced each other like waves on the shore, and soon everyone around was talking only about the upcoming ceremony. Guests continued to arrive. Some hurried to the lobby to check in, others were already enjoying tropical cocktails at the bar, and the closest friends of the bride and groom shared memories in anticipation of this important moment. The hotel area was gradually filled with lively conversations, the clinking of glasses, quiet splashes of water in the pool, and the light tinkling of decorations hanging on the terrace. Women floated along garden paths and verandas like colorful butterflies, their bright summer dresses fluttering in the gentle ocean breeze. Their laughter sounded iridescent and sparkled, adding lightness to the morning atmosphere. The men, more relaxed, sat at the tables, having leisurely conversations about sports, business, and, of course, marriage after all. This was the central theme of the day. The ceremony was to take place on the sandy shore, and the place had already been prepared to the smallest detail. White chairs with thin ivory ribbons were neatly lined up in two even rows, forming a wide alley that seemed like a path to a new life. Fresh rose and jasmine petals were scattered across it, exuding a delicate aroma. The arch, woven from snow-white orchids and vines, rose against the backdrop of the endless turquoise ocean, like a portal to a fairy tale. A light breeze made the flowers sway, and the waves behind them created a melody that became part of this magical moment. I couldn't miss this chance and almost mechanically picked up the camera. My breathing became even, and the world around me seemed to slow down. I wanted to capture every detail, every sincere emotion, every glimmer of light on the faces of the guests. People smiled, looked at each other, someone straightened their hair, and whispered excitedly. Excitement was visible in the eyes of the groom. He rubbed his palms every now and then, but as soon as he looked at the path leading to the arch, everything around seemed to disappear for him. And then, finally, the music changed. At this moment, time truly stood still. The bride appeared. Emily stepped into the alley scattered with petals, and everyone around her held their breath. She looked dazzling. Her dress, light, as if woven from morning fog, flowed softly across the sand. The snow-white fabric fluttered from light gusts of wind, giving her image an almost unearthly glow. Her hair, styled in an elegant updo, was adorned with tiny pearls like dewdrops. Her eyes shone as if the sun itself was reflected in them, and her smile was full of pure, sincere happiness. The groom, Mark, seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. He took a tiny step forward, then stopped, flexing his fingers nervously, but his smile spoke louder than any words. At that moment, the whole world narrowed to one point, the one where their eyes met. I caught this moment through the lens, holding my breath. This was the very second for which it was worth keeping the camera ready. A second filled with love, excitement, anticipation, dreams. It is these kinds of shots that remain in the memory forever. I filmed, trying to capture every emotion, the tears in the eyes of the bride's mother, the proud smile of the father, the sincere laughter of friends. At some point, I turned to take a general shot of the guests, and then I saw her, my mysterious stranger. She stood among the bridesmaids, slightly to the side, watching the ceremony with a slight smile. The same wavy hair, the same expressive eyes, the same aura of mystery. My heart sank in my chest. I took the photo without even realizing what I was doing. "Ben, you're too focused," said the voice of Kevin, the photographer we met the day before, from nearby. I turned my gaze to him, but just shook my head. Just a good shot. After the ceremony, the gala dinner began. Guests sat at long tables decorated with candles and fresh flowers. Light notes of jasmine were in the air, mixing with the aromas of delicious dishes. I sat down next to Alex and Linda, who were discussing the evening's dance program. At that moment, a mysterious girl approached us. Linda immediately smiled at her. "Oh, finally. Ben, meet my best friend Amanda." I barely managed to hide my surprise. So that's who she is. Amanda looked at me with the same mysterious expression as on the beach, tilting her head slightly. "It seems that we have already met." I grinned, sipping my wine. "Perhaps. But now I have a chance to find out more." She smiled. Her gaze was both flirtatious and probing. "Let's see how you take advantage of this chance." I felt tension hanging in the air. Our eyes met, And at that moment, I realized that this evening was going to be completely different than I expected. Perhaps this was the meeting that would change everything. The wedding celebration gained momentum, the music sounded louder, the guests became more relaxed, and the evening gradually moved into that phase when formalities faded into the background. I sat at the table, holding a glass of wine in my hand, and watched those around me. It all looked like a scene from an old romantic film: golden light from lanterns, flickering candles, a light breeze rustling the snow-white tablecloths. But my attention was focused on one figure: Amanda. She sat opposite, a little to the side, with a cocktail in her hand, and quietly discussed something with Linda. Her light dress softly flowed around her figure, emphasizing the elegance of her movements. I couldn't help but notice the grace with which she laughed, the way her eyes sparkled as she animatedly gesticulated. One thought was running through my head. What the hell was this mystery woman doing alone on the beach that night? Linda suddenly turned to me and, noticing my gaze, smiled slyly. "Ben, have you gotten to know Amanda better yet? Fix it now. I'll leave you alone. Ben, don't let me down." I chuckled as I watched her walk away and then looked over at Amanda. She calmly sipped her cocktail as if she was not at all embarrassed by my gaze. "So you're Linda's friend," I said to ease the tension. "Yes, for many years now. She told me about you. She said that you are a person who knows how to see special moments. I'm a photographer, this is my job. And yet not everyone knows how to capture something real. I think you can do it." I chuckled. There was a hint in her words, and I decided to play along. It's not every day you meet a girl who appears out of nowhere on the beach at night and disappears into the waves. Amanda tilted her head, a slight smile touching her lips. "So you decided that it was some kind of secret. Maybe I was just enjoying the moment. Or was she hiding from someone? I faked it." She laughed, but something elusive flashed in her eyes. Maybe it was just my imagination. "Do you like riddles, Ben? If they are interesting enough. And how interesting am I to you?" I put my elbows on the table and leaned a little closer. "Let's find out." Amanda slowly reached for her glass, but her gaze never left mine. There was laughter all around, someone was already dancing near the stage, the waiters were bringing new dishes, and I suddenly realized that this evening had taken a completely different turn. "Then let's begin," she said quietly and extended her hand. I took her hand, feeling its warmth, and thought that this conversation was just the beginning of something much more complex and intriguing. The evening was rapidly moving towards its climax. Guests filled the dance floor, sand crushed underfoot, and the starry sky spilled overhead. Amanda and I left the table and headed to the bar. The music muffled outside conversations, leaving space for just the two of us. "Tell me, Ben," she said, watching the bartender mix a cocktail. "Why did you choose photography? There is more art than money in this." I chuckled as I took my drink. "Money is a tool, and art is an opportunity to leave a mark. I like to capture moments that may disappear forever." She nodded approvingly and took a sip, closing her eyes slightly. "It seems to me that you are not just recording moments. You try to understand their meaning." I shrugged, tilting my head slightly. "Perhaps I am trying to understand people, like you." She smiled, but a mystery flashed in her eyes. "Then let's play a game. You ask me 3 questions, but I may not answer one." "Agreed. First, why were you alone on the beach that night?" Amanda thought, her fingers sliding along the rim of her glass. "I was looking for silence. Sometimes it's too easy to lose yourself in the noise." I nodded, accepting the answer. "Second, are you hiding something from me?" She chuckled and cocked her head to the side. "Everyone is hiding something. The question is whether you are ready to dig deeper." I took a sip and thought about the last question. "Third, are you in a relationship?" She looked at me for a long time and then said quietly, "This is a question that I will not answer." We looked at each other in silence for some time. There was something hypnotizing in this look, something that I could not yet unravel. The music gradually faded away in perception, as if the whole world had stopped, leaving only the two of us. Amanda was the first to look away, placing her glass on the counter and slowly standing up. But if you really want to know the answer, she said quietly, looking into my eyes, let's just meet again. No questions asked, no games. When and where? Without hesitation, I asked. She chuckled slightly, as if anticipating something interesting. When we get home. Here is my number, call me on Monday afternoon. I nodded. Then see you later, Amanda. She turned around and, without saying another word, disappeared into the dark twilight of the evening. Since that wedding evening, Amanda has never left my mind. I spent the night replaying our conversation in my thoughts, her mysterious smiles, light hints, understatement, which attracted me even more. On Monday afternoon, as she said, I dialed her number. Hi, Ben. Her voice was as soft and warm as I remembered. You are punctual. You're mysterious, I chuckled. Where and when do we meet? Tonight. I have one place I think y'all like. I will send the address in a message. I didn't ask unnecessary questions, although my curious nature was torn to pieces. What place? What was she up to? But judging by our last conversation, Amanda liked to keep things interesting. When I arrived at the indicated address, I was greeted by a small, cozy restaurant on the roof of an old building, hidden from the eyes of tourists. The entire city stretched out before us in the soft evening light, and a light wind moved the thin curtains on the open terrace. Amanda was already waiting for me, sitting at a table in the far corner with a glass of wine in her hand. You've come, she smiled when I sat down opposite. Certainly. I told you I wouldn't miss this chance. She looked at me for a long time, as if assessing how sincere my words were. I caught myself thinking that I was feeling a little nervous. This was not an ordinary date. There was something more to this evening, the feeling that one step in the wrong direction, and the magic of the moment could crumble. We talked about everything. About travel, about the people you met, about life in big cities, and the desire for freedom. Her voice was mesmerizing, her movements were smooth, and every glance was like a subtle game that I couldn't help but get involved in. After dinner, we went out onto the terrace, where the sparkling night city spread out before us. Amanda moved closer, leaning on the railing. Have you ever just stopped and looked at the city, without thoughts, without plans, just enjoying the moment? She asked quietly. I stood next to her, watching the wind blow through the strands of her hair. Now is exactly the case. She turned to me, and tension hung between us. I couldn't help but notice how her breathing became a little deeper, how her fingers lightly touched my hand. It was that moment when there was no need for words. I gently ran my fingers over her cheek, and she didn't look away. Then I leaned over and kissed her, slowly, sensually, allowing yourself to dissolve in this moment. Her lips responded to me with the same fervor, as if this moment was inevitable. The wind, the stars, the rhythm of the night city, everything disappeared, only the two of us remained. Later, we found ourselves in her apartment, where the air was filled with anticipation and a quiet electricity of tension. The soft light of the lamps spread across the walls, creating warm, golden shadows that seemed to breathe with us. The smell of her perfume, subtle, mixed with the aroma of the wine left on the table and the light hint of rain that was still tapping on the window glass. Everything happened slowly, as if time was stretched out, allowing us to experience every moment to the smallest detail. It wasn't just the first time we had sex, it was a night filled with emotions, tension, and anticipation that had been building up since the very moment we met. I knew that from that moment on everything would change. Everything has already changed. This is how our relationship began to develop. We met more and more often, spending every free minute together, going to cozy cafes, walking around the city at night, talking until the morning. All this has become part of our world. I began to get to know Amanda more deeply, her habits, small gestures, her passion for art and literature. In her presence, I felt truly alive. Soon it was time to meet her friends. They turned out to be cheerful, relaxed people who immediately accepted me into their circle. I especially became friends with her friend Sarah, a bubbly brunette who constantly joked about our couple. I never thought that Amanda would fall in love with a photographer, she laughed. She is usually attracted to people who sit in offices and wear expensive suits. And I'm a special case, I retorted, hugging Amanda around the waist. She just smiled, looking at me with that same mysterious look that always left me with a slight tension. The only one I didn't like was her friend Jack. There was something about him that caused me a strange repulsion. He was friendly, said the right things, smiled at the right moments, but it seemed to me that there was something more behind it. His gaze is too appraising, his jokes are too caustic. It seemed as if he was testing me, as if he was waiting for me to fail. I couldn't say exactly what it was about him that repulsed me, but when he appeared next to Amanda, a feeling of anxiety awoke in me. Maybe it was just simple jealousy, or maybe I really should have been more careful. However, I didn't want to show my concern because Amanda seemed completely at ease in his company, as if they had known each other forever. A couple of months later, Amanda insisted that I meet her parents. It was an important meeting, and for the first time in a long time I was nervous. Her father, a serious and respected man, was far from the world of art, but he listened carefully when I talked about my work. I kept silent about the fact that I'm not just a photographer. I don't know why, but I liked that I wasn't perceived as a bag of money. Her mother, on the contrary, turned out to be a warm and welcoming woman who immediately surrounded me with care. I like him, she told Amanda when she thought I wasn't listening. There's something real in his eyes. I pretended that I didn't hear, but inside I felt warmth from these words. Every day I realized that our connection was becoming stronger, and something inside told me that this was not just a passing hobby. It's been a little over a year since Amanda and I started dating. It was a time filled with bright moments, passion, discovering each other anew every day. I felt that next to her I was becoming better, stronger, more confident in my choice. But with every month, the realization grew stronger inside me. I don't want to lose her. I want Amanda to be a part of my life forever. I thought for a long time about when and how to propose to her. I wanted this to be not just a beautiful gesture, but something special, something that would remain in her memory for the rest of her life. Alex helped me with this, who, more than anyone else, understood how important it is to choose the perfect moment. The main thing is to make sure she doesn't suspect, he told me over a glass of beer. Women love surprises, but they also love to feel like it's a moment that has meaning. I nodded, going over the possible options in my head. I could do it in some fancy restaurant, but that would be too predictable. I could during the trip, but I wanted Amanda to feel safe and comfortable. In the end, I realized that the ideal place had already been chosen long ago. Beach. I prepared everything down to the smallest detail. I ordered dinner right on the shore, made an agreement with a musician who was supposed to play something light and romantic, and took care of a bottle of her favorite wine. Amanda had no idea. She arrived at the meeting place in a light summer dress, her hair slightly tousled by the ocean breeze. I felt my throat go dry with excitement. "You look incredible," I said as she came closer. "You too," she smiled, looking around at the prepared dinner. "What is this special occasion? I just wanted to spend the evening with you. Do you really need a reason?" We ate dinner, laughed, and reminisced about our craziest moments. I caught her gaze, her slight gestures, the way she straightened her hair behind her ear, and I understood this is exactly what I want to see every day for the rest of my days. When the sun finally disappeared below the horizon, I stood up, took the box out of my pocket, and got down on one knee. Surprise flashed in her eyes, but at the same moment they were filled with sincere happiness. "Amanda," I said, feeling my heart pounding, "from the very night I saw you on the beach, I knew you were special. You turned my world upside down, made it brighter, richer. I can't imagine my life without you. Marry me." She covered her mouth with her hand, as if realizing that this was not a dream. Then her lips parted into the happiest smile I've ever seen. "Yes, of course, yes." I put the ring on her finger, and at that moment it seemed to me that the whole world exploded with joy. We kissed under the light of the moon, and somewhere in the background music began to play quietly. Wedding preparations have taken us by storm. Amanda was immersed in choosing a dress, a place for the ceremony, a menu for the guests, and I tried not to get lost in this chaos. The wedding had to be perfect, the one she dreamed of. We chose the place a spacious terrace overlooking the ocean, decorated with white flowers and candles. Everything was thought out to the smallest detail. 2 weeks before the event, we hosted a dinner for friends and family to celebrate our upcoming wedding day. The atmosphere was warm, almost homely. Candles flickered on a long wooden table, reflected in glasses of wine, plates quickly emptied, and the air was filled with laughter, interrupting the soft music coming from the speakers. From time to time, someone would raise a toast, recalling funny stories associated with us, and at these moments I felt a strange mixture of joy and anxiety overcome me. But even then, in the midst of all this serenity, I couldn't help but notice one thing: Jack. He was always there for Amanda. It was like her shadow, like a reminder of something important, something that I didn't fully understand. He leaned towards her, whispered something, and she smiled, not the way she smiled at me, not the way she smiled at others. There was something special about that smile. I caught his glances when he thought no one was looking, and they seemed too attentive, too filled with something that I could not ignore. At some point, I walked over to the bar, where Alex was already pouring himself a whiskey. He noticed my expression and chuckled. "Are you nervous?" he asked, twirling the glass in his hands and lazily watching the guests. I took my glass, took a sip, feeling the burning liquid pour down my throat, and nodded towards the table, where Amanda was still sitting. And Jack. I would be less nervous if this Jack didn't show up wherever Amanda is. My voice sounded harsher than I intended. I placed the glass on the counter and clenched my fingers. "Don't you find this strange?" Alex shrugged, as if he didn't see anything unusual in this, but something attentive flashed in his gaze. "They've been friends for a long time," he said casually, raising the glass to his lips. "But yes, he doesn't seem happy about the wedding. Maybe he doesn't understand what he feels." I snorted, looking back at Jack. He sat too close to her, his hand barely touching her elbow. "Or he understands too well," I muttered, clutching the glass so tightly that my knuckles turned white. On the wedding day, the sky was cloudless. A light sea breeze pleasantly cooled the air. The guests took their seats. Music smoothly filled the space. I stood at the altar, waiting for Amanda, and felt my heart beating faster. And then she appeared. Amanda looked amazing, her dress, her look, her light, barely noticeable smile. At that moment, I knew this was the right choice. This is our destiny. As she got closer, I noticed Jack standing next to the bridesmaids. He looked at her, at us, and there was something in his gaze that made me tense. Admiration, sadness, envy, I couldn't make it out. The ceremony went perfectly. We exchanged vows, exchanged rings, and kissed to the applause of the guests. At that moment, I didn't think about anything but her, my wife. At the wedding dinner, the atmosphere was relaxed and light. The guests congratulated us, dancing, music, everything mixed into one happy whirlwind. The first year of marriage seemed perfect. We enjoyed our life together, trips, evenings in restaurants, and lazy mornings in bed. Everything seemed right and harmonious. Amanda was still the same person I fell in love with, smart, passionate, mysterious. However, over time, small, almost imperceptible cracks began to appear. At first, it was little things. She began to stay late at work more often. Sometimes she went to meetings with friends that I didn't know about. I didn't want to be a jealous husband, so I didn't ask unnecessary questions. We trusted each other, didn't we? But then I started to notice something else. The phone, which she could previously leave anywhere, was now almost always with her. Sometimes she'd smile at the screen as she read the messages, but if I asked what was so funny, she'd say something vague like, "Oh, it's just Sarah being stupid," or "work stuff." What bothered me most was Jack's presence. He still showed up in our lives too often. They met for coffee, discussed some old memories, and I felt that nothing had changed on their part. He was there, in her life, nearby. Always. One evening, I returned home to find Amanda in the living room with a glass of wine. Her phone was on the table, and while she was going into the bedroom to change clothes, the screen lit up with an incoming message. "Do you miss me?" The sender is a number without a name. I wasn't one to go through other people's phones. I wasn't one to make jealous scenes. But at that moment, I realized that the ideal picture of our marriage began to crumble. I didn't yet know whether it was just an empty flirtation or the beginning of something more, but something turned upside down inside me. I looked at the bedroom where Amanda was changing clothes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that something invisible was standing between us, something that could destroy everything we've built. Several months have passed since I first saw a suspicious message on Amanda's phone. Then I told myself that I would not make hasty conclusions. I wanted to believe that this was just a game, that nothing serious was happening. But the further I went, the more my confidence crumbled. Amanda has changed. She came home late more and more often, and could leave for the weekend without explanation, leaving me in the dark. And when I asked, she waved it off. Have you become a jealous husband? Ben, don't be so boring. I have a life outside of our marriage. These words hurt. I didn't want to control her, but I couldn't help but notice the obvious. And then I saw the messages again. This time Frank. One day her phone lit up again while she was in the shower. I looked at the screen and saw several notifications from a contact, work. One text in the preview felt like a knife pierced my chest. I can't wait to feel you again. You were absolutely incredible. Breathing became erratic. Hands clenched into fists. I knew I shouldn't, but my fingers automatically reached for the phone. Having unlocked it, I fell into a nightmare from which there was no way out. You're driving me crazy. Your husband is blind. I wonder if he notices how you glow after our meetings. How do your legs still shake when you return home? I continued reading, and with each message, everything turned upside down inside. They didn't just cheat, they laughed. Above me. You squirm so passionately when I hold you. Has he ever made you lose your head like that? I love that you come to him after me. That he doesn't even know what you're thinking while you're lying next to him. Honestly, it turns me on that you're mine, and he's just a convenient foil. My chest tightened and my fingers squeezed the phone so hard it almost cracked. They enjoyed it. They were mocking. This was not just a deception. It was betrayal with a smile on the lips. I read further, and with each new message, a chill grew inside me. Amanda answered him, flirted, and joked. She wrote how tired she was of family life, how irritated she was by my routine and my predictability, how boring I am in bed, how she feels alive only with him. You should have seen his face when I came home after our meetings. He has no idea that a couple of hours ago I was screaming with pleasure in another bed. I closed my eyes. The world in front of me collapsed. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't imagine it had gone that far. I sat with her phone in my hands while the sound of water came from the bathroom. I could go there right now and demand an explanation. But what difference would it make? She betrayed me. She made fun of me. I shared with my lover the details of our life, our relationship. She humiliated me without even trying to hide her contempt. At that moment, love died in me. All that was left was rage. But I couldn't let her take over. I had to act coldly, calculatingly. If Amanda is so confident in her impunity, she is mistaken. I put the phone back and left the room to hide my emotions. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't just leave it like that. When Amanda came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, she smiled at me as if nothing had changed. As if these messages, her betrayal, her ridicule did not exist. Everything is fine, she asked, sitting down on the bed. I nodded, suppressing all emotions. Am just tired, I answered. Long day. She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, not even realizing that I knew. And this was to my advantage. She didn't suspect anything. She thought I was a fool. But if she thought I would swallow this humiliation, she was mistaken. I must throw her away like the smoking heap of garbage that she is and leave her in a scorched earth void that she can never escape from. The next day, I started collecting evidence. If I was going to destroy her world, I had to be precise, methodical, and merciless. The first thing I did was take her phone while she was sleeping and took pictures of all her correspondence with her lover. Every dirty word, every mockery of me, I kept it all. Then I installed a program on her laptop that recorded all her actions. Now I had access to her correspondence, search queries, even photographs that she sent to her lover. And the more I saw, the more hatred boiled in me. The most shocking discovery was that her infidelity did not start recently. Amanda hasn't been faithful to me from the very beginning. From the very first day before we met, she had someone else, perhaps even several people. She played me like a puppet, laughing behind my back, using me as a reliable backstop while she lived her double life. I couldn't believe it. I reread the messages in which she discussed me with her friends and lovers. They called me convenient option, reliable, boring. They laughed at the way I carried her in my arms, thinking I was making her happy. But now I was different. I wasn't going to go quietly. I didn't mean to make a scene. I was going to destroy her. I pretended that I didn't know anything. He behaved as always loving, caring, attentive. In my heart, I was disgusted with my own game, but I knew that, for the sake of perfect revenge, I had to be patient. Then I installed hidden cameras in the house. Amanda often called him when she thought I was working late. Now I had more than just correspondence, I had proof. All that remained was to choose the moment when I will destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine. But above all, I made sure to protect myself. I moved all my assets into a separate account that she did not have access to, changed the passwords to all bank accounts, and canceled any joint financial obligations. I also contacted an attorney and put together a preliminary divorce plan to make sure Amanda didn't get a penny more than she deserved. I closed all credit cards that could be used against me and reviewed legal documents, ensuring complete financial security for myself. Now that I knew that my finances were out of her reach, I could safely continue with my plan. All that remains is to make her believe that she is still in control of the situation while I prepare the ground for her final collapse. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Too long. The days dragged on, turning into weeks, weeks into months, while I accumulated evidence, hatched a plan, thought through every step, like a chess player bringing his opponent closer to the inevitable checkmate. But this was not supposed to be just a revelation. No. This was supposed to be a show, a grand performance that would be etched into the memory of Amanda and her lovers like a hot iron into the skin. They must have felt what I felt: confusion, pain, humiliation. They had to realize that their days of impunity were over. I organized an evening that looked like the perfect romantic surprise. A meeting in honor of our anniversary, a carefully planned celebration of love as everyone saw it. Except me. I invited not only our friends, but also her. Those who supported Amanda, those who were complicit in her betrayal, knowing but choosing to remain silent. Their silence made them just as guilty. If they allowed her to humiliate me, then they deserved to witness her downfall. The location was perfect. One of the most expensive restaurants in the city, where the soft candlelight made the atmosphere intimate, the wine flowed like a river, and the waiters moved silently, like shadows. Crystal chandeliers cast reflections on the snow-white tablecloths. A string quartet played softly in the corner, filling the air with melodies that were supposed to emphasize the importance of the moment. The guests smiled, laughed, and congratulated us. I responded in kind, hiding under the mask of an ideal husband the real storm that's raging inside. Amanda was the center of attention. She was beaming, her blue silk dress highlighting the curves of her body, thin gold bracelets rattling on her wrist as she gesticulated, telling something to her friends. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. She had no idea. I couldn't guess. She thought that this was her evening, her triumph, her holiday. But in reality, it was my triumph, my holiday. Jack was here too, her faithful friend. He sat next to her, too close as always, his hand almost touching her thigh. He laughed, joked, and gave me appraising glances. He thought I was an idiot. I thought I didn't notice anything. He felt like he was in charge, believing that he had everything under control. Fool. I raised the glass to my lips, pretending to taste the wine, and glanced at my watch. It's almost time. The heart froze for a moment, then began to beat evenly and clearly, like a metronome. Each blow reminded me that I was close to climax, that my plan was finally coming to fruition. I took a deep breath, held the air in my lungs, and smiled. None of them knew that in a few minutes their world would collapse. I stepped up to the stage, picked up the microphone, and said my first words. "Dear friends, thank you for coming to celebrate this special day with us. The day when we celebrate love, devotion, and—" I paused, looking straight at Amanda, honesty. She smiled back, not yet understanding what I was driving at. The lights in the hall went out. There was silence, only somewhere the clink of glasses, muffled voices, and the whispers of curious guests could be heard. The first frame flashed on the screen, Amanda kissing me on my wedding day. Her eyes shine with happiness, her dress exquisitely fits her slender body. The perfect moment. A beautiful, romantic start. The guests applauded, some even sighed with emotion. And then the picture changed. I felt the air in the hall become thick and heavy, as if before a thunderstorm. An image of her correspondence appeared on the screen. Clear text, large letters. "You're so good in bed. Has your husband ever given you such pleasure?" The roar of applause died down instantly. There was deathly silence in the hall. Several people laughed nervously, as if hoping it was a joke, a ridiculous production. But no, this was reality. I heard someone gasp. Everything in my chest tightened from excitement, from anticipation, from the feeling of absolute power over the situation. Amanda turned sharply to me, her eyes, a second ago full of warmth, widened in horror. Her lips trembled, as if she was trying to say something, but the words were stuck in her throat. There was bewilderment in her gaze, then panic, then realization. She realized that she had been exposed. There was fear in her breathing, muffled sobs. Her body tensed, as if expecting a blow. "Ben, what is this?" Her voice was barely audible. It trembled and was interrupted. I took a sip of champagne, enjoying her fear, and, slowly, continued. "Let's watch a little more." I clicked the remote control, and the screen came to life again. The frames changed one after another. The cameras I installed in our home captured every detail, every dirty moment. Another shot. She laughs with her friends, telling her how naive I am, how easy it is for me to lie, how funny it is to see me as a faithful, devoted, unsuspecting fool. Every word she said sounded clear, every sound revealed her betrayal. The whole hall heard it. Everyone saw it. Then there were shots of intimate scenes in different places. Hotel rooms, the back seats of cars, even our own rooms. Amanda was liberated, hungry, and insatiable. She acted as if her existence outside of marriage was her real life, and I was just a loser she was keeping for convenience. People looked at each other in shock. Someone looked away, someone hid their face in their hands. Someone looked at Amanda with undisguised contempt, someone with hatred. "This is not true," she shouted, jumping out of her chair, her breathing hitched. This is fake," but her voice trembled. It was full of despair and fear. There was no confidence in him. She knew she was caught. Everyone knew. Jack turned pale, looking around. He understood that now his name was forever associated with this shame. His fingers clenched into fists, sweat dripping down his temples. He wanted to run away, dissolve, disappear. But it was too late. I slowly tilted my head to the side, savoring her panic, her humiliation, her fear. "Maybe you can explain it to us, Amanda, to everyone who was part of your game." She silently opened her mouth, but could not find words, because there were no explanations. I watched her world crumble, how her self-satisfied confidence shatters into pieces, how from a prosperous wife, surrounded by admiration, she turns into an object of ridicule, disgust, and contempt. The guests no longer looked at her with respect. Now they looked at her as if she were fallen, dirty, and it felt damn good. She opened her mouth, tried to say something, but the words got stuck in her throat. Her hands trembled, her eyes darted around the hall, looking for support, but no one dared to intervene. "You're pathetic, Amanda." My voice was calm and cold. You thought that you could humiliate me behind my back, laugh at me with these. I nodded towards her friends and lover. But who laughs now? Did you think that I would remain a comfortable, obedient husband? That ill close my eyes because I'm scared of losing you. You didn't just betray me. You trampled our life, turned it into a dirty joke in which I was assigned the role of an idiot. But now we have switched roles. I paused, enjoying the way her face turned pale. Do you know what's the funniest thing? I grinned. You always thought you were in control of the situation. But here we are, and you are completely helpless. She stood up sharply, her eyes sparkling with anger. You're a bastard, Ben. You made me a laughing stock. I leaned forward, looking her straight in the eyes. No, Amanda, you did it yourself. I just pressed the play button. At that moment, a lawyer, my representative, approached her. Mrs. Brooks, he said, handing her a folder, here are the divorce papers. All of your husband's assets have been transferred to accounts that are inaccessible to you, and the property that you controlled has been transferred to trust management. Sign them in the presence of witnesses, or we will continue the proceedings in court on the grounds of treason and slander. Amanda almost fainted from shock. I nodded politely to her. Goodbye, Amanda. I hope Jack takes you to live with him. Unless, of course, he wants to run away. Turning around, I took one last sip of champagne and walked towards the exit. There was a deathly noise behind me. Someone whispered, someone rushed towards Amanda, but I didn't turn around. I felt my heart finally getting lighter. I didn't want this revenge, but it became my necessary protection. I've allowed myself to be considered a fool for too long. When I went outside, it was a warm, almost summer night. The air smelled of freshness, lanterns shone all around, life was in full swing. But for me, the whole world seemed to take a breath. I felt neither joy nor remorse, just cold devastation. It seemed to me that I had gained freedom, but at the same time I realized that I had lost a lot. In the coming weeks, I moved out of our shared home, or rather, from what we considered common. Now there were lawyers' seals there, confirming my full ownership and Amanda's non-admission. I moved all my valuables, documents, photographs to a new apartment, which I managed to buy in advance. Amanda tried to call, write, and threaten with lawsuits and reprisals. But the lawyer was on my side. I had irrefutable evidence of her infidelity. Soon she calmed down, apparently realizing the futility of the struggle. Jack at first tried to be her protector, but soon he also realized that the situation reeked of scandal and financial loss. I threw myself into work, into business, into new investments. My financial sphere was reliably protected, but photography, my true refuge in difficult times, became my salvation again. I walked the streets, filming other people's emotions and faces. Sometimes I was visited by a vague regret. Maybe I shouldn't have taken everything to such an extreme. Maybe they could just get a divorce. But every time, remembering the sarcastic lines of her messages, ridicule, meanness, I realized that for her this was a well-deserved lesson. Time passed, and the wave of gossip subsided. When I met a mutual friend, I noticed respect and sympathy in his gaze at the same time. Someone was saying, "Yes, Ben, you did what you had to do. You should have thrown her away like the smoking pile of garbage that she is, and left her in a scorched earth void from which she could never escape. There is no point in putting up with this kind of attitude." Someone shook their head, thinking that I acted harshly, but I stood my ground. There was a need to show that my feelings should not be played with, that I was not a thing or a wallet on legs. I am a man. When the divorce was officially finalized, I felt completely new. It was as if a cloud hanging over me had lifted. Of course, there was sediment left inside. It can be difficult to trust after such betrayal. But I realized how strong I am when I decided to protect myself. A few months after the messy divorce, I was slowly returning to normal. I didn't immediately jump into a new relationship. My soul needed time to heal the wounds, to comprehend what I had experienced. I saw my friend Alex periodically. He supported me, and his wife Linda apologized for Amanda's behavior, although it was not her fault. I plunged headlong into investing. I studied innovative projects, new startups, and bought shares. I became more and more independent, not only financially, but also psychologically. At the same time, I developed in photography. I took orders to photograph corporate events. Sometimes I photographed weddings, but only on the recommendation of close friends, so as not to get into too personal dramas. One day, I organized my own photo exhibition. The photo exhibition was an event that I prepared long and carefully. I knew that this would not just be a demonstration of my art, but also an act of final liberation. I selected shots, made selections, composed an exposition as if arranging pieces on a chessboard. Some of the photos were taken a long time ago, others were taken more recently, but they all reflected what I went through. And among them were those same photographs. Photos from that night. The same one when I first saw her on the beach, shrouded in moonlight. When her body merged with the waves, creating the perfect combination of nature and human grace. It was art, pure magic of the moment. Amanda plunging into the ocean, her naked silhouette dissolving in the silvery light of the moon. It seemed as if the water itself was accepting her, hiding her, making her a part of itself. These shots were the most powerful I've ever taken. They were so fascinating that no one, even without knowing the history, could remain indifferent. The exhibition took place in one of the galleries in Manhattan, a spacious hall with dim lighting, soft music, glasses of champagne, lively conversations. The guests slowly moved from one photograph to another, discussed, admired, and asked questions. But when they reached the central part of the exhibition, those very photographs, the conversations died down. There she is, Amanda, mysterious, ephemeral, as if part of the elements themselves. Nobody knew who she was. For everyone, it was simply a stunning series of photographs that captured the elusive beauty of the moment. But I knew, and she knew too. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next